Hello and welcome to episode 151 titled In Degrees. Well, we're not talking temperatures, but Tony will explain why. My name is Dr. KK and I'm the innovation officer at Trinka. And Tony, please take it away.
Hi everyone, I'm Tony O'Rourke, VP for Partnerships here at Nargo. Welcome to PubShorts, which is our regular discussion around stories relating to the world of academic research and academic publishing. And we like to give these episodes a theme and name them after particular songs which may link somehow to that theme. Today's episode is called In Degrees, as KK rightly points out, and it's named after a song by the group Foals from 2019. The song captures what this episode is capturing is the gradual incremental shifts reshaping publishing, open science realignment, AI brain drain, metadata citizenship, and the slow accumulation of AI eroding quality as it happens in degrees, as it slowly happens, but it's happening in reality.
As always, nail the summary. I do not know how you do it every time, Tony. I cannot believe
it. It's remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, first story. If it's a guest post from the Scholarly Kitchen, AI isn't going to pay for content, part 2, the path forward. So if you're wondering if it's a deja vu all over again situation, that's because we covered part 1 a few episodes ago. So this is part 2, written by Jonathan Wone, arguing that AI training won't be a big revenue source for publishers. The real money is in how AI is being used in terms of interpretation. I think we covered related story, specifically during the inference stage. And the author compares the current situation to the music industry's struggle with Napster. Tony, were you around when Napster was a thing? I'm sure you were.
I certainly was around when Napster was a thing.
Yeah,
yes. And,
Metallica was Napster. Yeah, yes. Demand for knowledge was still high, but how it's delivered is changing, the author writes, and the payment models need to catch up. Publishers are in a turbulent middle of this reallocation. So it proposes 3 models. I think I'm going to, these are, I think, the reallocation pattern. Hold on. Yeah, there's 3 models. So it's a pay-per-use model. So it's like pay-per-view model. Bring your own license model. I guess it's like your own beer model, and licensing on demand, which is I don't know, but I should probably not compare it to anything else. So all these are obvious. The author stresses that the importance of establishing norms early. Inference using premium content should be paid, which I completely agree, Tony. If suppose somebody is using an AI, let's say a chatbot or like a Google AI overview, and getting valuable information which is behind a paywall, obviously the service provider should be paying for it, because that is how you can make revenue. Nothing comes free in the world, right, Tony? What do you think of the proposals? No free lunch.
Well,
yeah.
no, there is no free lunch. I mean, if an LLM is going to use third-party content to train itself, there needs to be some kind of remuneration. I think the author is right to say there is no long-term major revenue reliance, but there should be a continued revenue from AI. If one thing of training the AI on a back file, if you're going to continue to train the AI based on future content, there has to be some kind of recognition of that. I don't know how substantial that is, but there needs to be some kind of recompense. And the author comes up with some interesting models. I can't see pay-per-use working necessarily, because that will just stop. Or they'll just find alternate ways of sourcing the data, but there has to be some kind of way of licensing the content. So he comes up with some interesting models that are worthy of discussion.
Right. Moving on to the next story. This is from the London School of Economics. This is from the London School of Economics. We need to move beyond the accept, reject binary peer review and opinion piece. It argues that the current peer review system, which relies on a binary, accept or reject, has become conflated with validation. And this binary system is flawed because it's not a reliable filter for identifying soundness and sound research. Flawed or fabricated work can pass, and passing peer review does not guarantee validity. I think, Tony, you will probably argue that this has always been the case. Nothing's new about it. Yeah, there's a myth that validation is truly binary, but it's not the case. In reality, journal prestige, impact factors, and brand reputation act as proxies for quality, creating a hierarchy rather than a clear distinction between valid and invalid research. And it also mentions another myth that the research is strictly sound or unsound. It can be a gray area. There's a continuum for all of this, is the argument. So the authors of the blog propose moving towards a open peer review as a solution. This would make assessment more public and more visible. And for allowing nuanced judgment and shifting validation from a binary to a sort of a continuum. Open review also means that peer review can be recognized and valued, even when a peer paper isn't accepted. That's a point that I hadn't thought of, because peer. I don't know how you can give recognition when peer review is happens for papers that are not published. So something that I hadn't thought of. And embracing a collaborative and iterative evaluation aligns better with how scientific knowledge actually develops. So I completely agree with many of the points here. What do you think? As in terms of the binary, do you think we should go beyond? Let's say, okay, this is an accepted paper. This is a rejected paper, as opposed to somewhere in between. But would that make things very difficult for a journal?
I think that would make things very difficult for a journal. Look, just because a paper is rejected doesn't mean the paper is a bad paper or is a poor paper. Papers are presented to journals all the time. They're perfectly sound papers. They might represent the science in a fair way, but if they don't reflect the scope of the journal, the objectives of the journal, the aims of the publication, where the editor in chief and the team sees that journal positioned, if it doesn't add any value to the journal itself, or to and also to the greater literature, then there's no reason to accept it. But it doesn't mean to say it's a bad paper. Every paper will find a home eventually. Every paper will find a home. It may not necessarily be the first choice. I think that a binary, although it's flawed, it may miss out on the occasional good paper. It's simple to understand, and it's saying you've either been accepted because you've ticked all the boxes. You're good enough for this particular journal. Doesn't mean to say it's not good enough for someone else, or bad enough for someone else. It just means that you've passed that particular journal's threshold. Also, the point about not every paper that's peer reviewed is actually published. And we've seen examples of that where you provide a peer review report, and then for whatever reason the author decides to withdraw the paper. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen.
Right. And one point that I would like to sort of stress is that rejection does not always mean lack of quality. It is also the lack of alignment with the scope and the visions of a particular journal. So that's another point to consider in this context.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the next one. It is a global perspective from a Scholarly Futures blog, Open Science and a Coming Realignment. And this post looks at what happens to open science when the US of A steps back from UNESCO, which is planned to be in 2026, which means less American influence over open science governance. So the timing matters, as per the author, because China has just announced its own frameworks, which is basically the Action Plan for International Cooperation in Open Science, which was announced in December 2025, as per this article. It targets the Global South. 6 objectives cover governance, data sharing, infrastructure, journals, engagement, and capacity building. And there's also an Open Science 10 initiative led by the Chinese Academy of Sciences as well, apart from many other institutions. They proposed a federated infrastructure alliance in September. September's Open Science Fair in Geneva. Partners would include Crossref, OSF, and EOSC. So this is all mentioned here. The key question is about what participation is. The key question is about what participation as a node in a Chinese anchor network means. So because of the firewalls and everything. So what would that mean? If Crossref or EOSC join a Chinese anchor network, Tony, do they stay truly global, or do they become a regional piece in a bigger system? These are the questions that the author is asking. So I'll now throw it to you, Tony. I mean, our colleagues work in the China publishing space to sort of break these barriers and provide gateways between the world and China. What do you think of the author's concerns regarding the Chinese sort of new standards, especially as US is leaving the UNESCO and open science governance is shifting?
Well, you can look. The balance is clearly shifting, isn't it? I mean, some of the political positions that have been taken in the US over the last few years, the increasing super emergence of China as a global power in terms of in many areas in industry, manufacturing, but particularly now looking at it is already and has been for several years the number one country for submissions for most scientific and medical journals, for certainly most scientific journals. And this again reinforces China's position as a world leader in terms of research. I mean, the world order unfortunately is changing, or has changed. One could argue.
Right. I agree. I mean, in the sense the shift, things are changing. We have covered the China, the rise of China over like 2 years. I feel
Mm,
this is like, yeah,
indeed.
yeah, right. Moving on to the next story. Oh, sorry. Next story, and moving on to this screen. So this is from the Digital Science blog by Simon Porter, VP of Research Futures. No shortcuts to research information citizenship. So the argument that the author makes is that declaring data open isn't enough. You need real infrastructure to provide clear provenance. Who produced the data? Where was it? How was it collected? Can you trust it? This is a very interesting perspective, and Tony, I want you to comment on it. The 2010s, as per the author, built these infrastructures like Orchid, DOIs, and ROR, and the 2020s pushed the adoption of it. But the author says that the 2030s needs a much, or the coming decade needs a much higher standard of robustness and AI systems and assessment reforms demanded. And here's a fragility of the problem. As per the author, services like OpenAlex look solid from the outside. So it's a commentary on OpenAlex, clean APIs and good coverage. But underneath it, about 40% of the affiliation data comes from web scraping, not from official open sources. And that fragility gets exposed like in late 2025 when OpenAlex lost a significant affiliation data. There was a problem, and the data was only open by tolerance and not by design. So the author criticizes the using bot evasion services like Zite to restore scraped data. So it goes against the scraping of data and needing true openness in terms of I think vendors and things like OpenAlex using the data and maintaining it. What are your thoughts? Because we use OpenAlex in the context of some of our products. Do you agree with Simon's arguments?
I don't know enough about OpenAlex to be able to comment. I mean, I know OpenAlex has sort of come, for me at least, it's sort of come out of nowhere in the last couple of years. I mean, I'm sure it's existed for some time. I do agree with his comments though about
like you need
the robust AI
yeah
across the piece, and how important it is that tools are being generated that will allow open research to be shared fairly. I mean, we're getting closer and closer to that point. We're still a long way off. But if authors were prepared, publishers were prepared to share metadata when it comes to Crossref because it was in their benefit, I think this is exactly the same. If more than just the metadata is being shared between publishers to create tools that can be used to enhance the kind of the integrity, or to really to support the integrity of the publisher system, then we need to be looking at it. And we've got the basic foundations, things like ORCIDs, RAWs, etc. It's how we now build on that moving forward.
Right. Another story from Open Science from the University of Cambridge. I found an interesting. New report urges broader definition of open research to include arts, humanities, and social science practices. So this is abbreviated as AHSS. Arts, humanities, and social sciences. So this obviously urges the expansion of open sciences, and the warning basically it issues is that the failure to do so, in failure to expand it to the AHSS, risks further marginalization of AHSS, and it calls funders, institutions, publishers, and monitoring initiatives to adopt broader layered definition, indicators, and support. So it also mentions that these fields have other means of sharing and openness, and this is obviously not maybe in line with the STM openness, and we need to have a bridge in terms of merging these two principles, and so that everything can be open. So any quick thoughts on this, Tony? Do you agree that AHS?
No, I'm having worked in humanities publishing in previous roles. I'm very happy to see stories like this, because the humanities content, academic content, isn't necessarily given the kind of editorial space that medical and scientific content is. Yet it's just as important in terms of development of the world we're in.
And a final main story we're covering is Silverchair's announcement that it has launched the Discovery Bridge MCP to connect scholarly content with AI-powered research workflows. So I think it just means what it says. The entitlement, and it arrives just about as the conversation about AI-mediated content across the industry is heating up, and the entitlement and paywall preservation angle is also key. I mean, we just talked about it in terms of whether there are different revenue revenue models now, pay per use and stuff like that. So this is sort of a bridge. And publishers have been wary of AI tools that bypass access controls, and Silverchair is positioning the Discovery Bridge, this one, but they're just launching, as a way to participate in AI workflows without giving away the entire store, they're saying. The end users are increasingly using chatbots, as we've just discussed, for research discovery, and it reflects what we are hearing from multiple sources, that it's not a future, it's a now trend. The retracted article exclusion feature is a smart differentiator. So basically, there are filters. Tony, we talked about this. Should AI be told that things are retracted so that it can sort of take away from its own sort of training memory? Remember David Warlock and those conversations?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's absolutely right. I mean, and what publishers, when something's retracted, it doesn't physically always mean that the paper was removed from the journal server. It just means that there's some kind of stamp,
Yeah.
some kind of watermark that's added to the paper to inform the reader that it's been retracted. But I think David's absolutely right, and this is absolutely right. It should be removed from the training literature.
Right. Ready for quick hits, Tony?
Yes.
All right. Four of them. How AI slop is causing a crisis in computer science. We have talked about it. It's a news article. So we are talking about the conferences such as Conference on Machine Learning, etc., having a bunch of submissions, and it discusses all the trends that exist. Nothing new to cover, but it's a story if you're not aware of how AI is causing a disruption in the very field which helped create AI itself. Is an interesting story. Any thoughts before I move on to the next?
No. Stop the slop.
Stop the slop. Indeed. Why sky high pay for AI researchers is bad for the future of science. So the author of this article, this is also from Nature, it's a comment. The authors argue that tech firms' massive spending on AI talent and individual compensation is creating an AI brain drain. And this undermines academia's role in curiosity-driven research, independent critique, and equitable team-based science. So all of these are sort of undermined, and the authors urge investment in collaborative, mission-driven institutions, shared infrastructure, and policies that distribute power and resources rather than concentrating them in a few elite hires. So, there will be companies who pay a lot of money for researchers who are the best in their fields. I guess we'll have to live with both, right? I mean, Tony, you cannot not have one or the other, right?
Oh, well, there's always been a drain of skills from academia into the corporate world. But I think AI has maybe accentuated that a little bit more. It is a concern that you see that all of the developments that we're seeing in AI, these are ones I'm aware of, tend to be coming from the corporate world rather than from academia.
Right. And the next one is a very heartening, pleasant news for all of us. Archive future-proofs access to research with third-party digital preservation. Yeah, so Archive has partnered with Portico, a non-profit dark archive service, and TIB, the German National Library of Science and Technology, to establish a third-party digital preservation of its preprint repository. Materials will be kept dark and only activated under catastrophic circumstances, supplementing Archive's existing house preservation infrastructure. So every preprint server, every journal should have something like this, right? We've talked about Portico in the past. What are your thoughts? Any thoughts?
No, I think initiatives like Portico, and also there's also locks. Let's not forget the lots of copies to keep stuff safe. Initiatives which out of Stanford, I believe, are absolutely essential. If you're anything can happen to publishers have closed their doors over the last 10, 20, 30 years. What happens to that content? If that publisher is not taken over by another publisher, that content disappears. So at least you can be sure here, if a publisher signs up to these standards and to these processes, that should anything happen to that content moving forward, that content will still be available for future researchers to use.
Right. And finally, we close with an interesting story, ZebMed and the digital transformation. Wait, where is that right story? Hold on.
ZebMed is in Zurich.
Right.
No, Hanover.
Right, I'm not able to pull but anyway, the story is about this. I'll go back to this. So, in a nutshell, we have a European sort of version of PubMed, and the reason for that to exist is because of the potential threat. It's a fundraiser. I mean, it is ZBMed has been launched as a fundraising campaign for OLSPub, an open European publication database intended to provide strategic redundancy for life science knowledge currently concentrated in the US funded PubMed, obviously. So, what do you think? I mean, I haven't, we talked about things shifting in terms of, funding not being available from the US, and obviously it's shifting sort of research integrity frameworks and going to the Chinese space. In terms of Europe, this is the first time I'm hearing something like this. So, any thoughts on this?
Listen, I've worked with the Centrale Bibliothek für Medizin, ZB Med, I believe, is part of the University of Hanover, or it's linked in Hanover. The German government for years have got research right, in my mind. They've funded research, where they've seriously identified centres of excellence for research and put special money into supporting those centres. And the libraries are at the heart of that process in terms of curating and disseminating good research. There are very few organizations in the world, at least in Europe, that could emulate what PubMed does. ZB Med is one of those few organizations because they have the scale, they have the capacity, they have the infrastructure, the know-how, the people that could do that. And if there's a concern about the future of PubMed, then actions need to be taken to find an alternative, surely.
Yeah.
And who better to do it than an organization like ZB Med, Medicine.
Right, said Tony, and that brings us to the end of episode 151 in degrees. As usual, I'll ask Tony as to how anybody who's just watched us for the episode 151 can find all the previous 150 episodes. Tony, please.
If you're watching this for the first time, where have you been? But welcome, nevertheless.
Yes.
If this has spiked your curiosity and your interest, then I urge you to visit our playlist over on YouTube. Just search for Inago PubShorts and you'll see all previous 150 episodes. We ask you to press that like button, as long as you like it, share with your colleagues, and also to leave us comments and suggestions in the comments box for future topics, future ideas. Tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like.
All right, so thank you for your feedback so far. It has helped us improve our content. And until the next time, this is Dr. Kike signing off. Bye, Tony. We will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
See you in the next one.